I'd like to welcome you to the Uncut Thread, a chat series exploring the world of quilting through conversation with special guests. Each week, we examine ideas and traditions and creative practices that shape quilting as both craft and art. My name is Cheryl Hills, and I'm your host for today. I want to thank everyone for joining us. We're glad to have you with us, and we look forward to a thoughtful discussion. Today's topic is the generational gap. How can older guilds better mentor younger quilters who prioritize digital tools and fast techniques? I have with me a special guest today. Her name is Candace Bracey, and I'd like to introduce her to you now. Hello, Candace. Welcome for joining me today.
Hi, Cheryl. Nice to be here.
Candace, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I live in New Jersey. I love crafting. Sewing is my first love, but I'm also a knitter, a crocheter, and I paint on the side. So I love to create things, but quilting is my first love. I've been quilting since like 1997, I started. But my love grew in the 2000s. So I've ventured out in different avenues of quilting. Um, and it's just been a wonderful journey for me right now. So
Candace, do you have a favorite type of quilt that you like to make?
I do. When it comes to quilting, the first thing I learned is to have a signature block. So if you don't mind, can I show you one of my block?
Absolutely.
So this is the book that I use. It was my first book of quilting. And I bought this at Joann's when they had the 50% off sale. So I really wanted to get into quilting. So what I did, I had some older fabric because I didn't know anything about a fabric store. This was my first block,
Oh, very nice.
but I thought it was too small.
And did you learn that block in a class or
No,
on your
I
own?
did it. I did it all on my own. What I did this was like I said in the early 2000s. I took the plastic templates, from the Joann's, and I traced this block from the book. But the only problem I was running into was that it's a 16-inch block. So I
Oh,
had no clue of really what I was doing in the beginning and scale. So I went to a guild near the library where I worked. So I made it into a pillow.
oh, very
This
nice.
was the how he taught me to make it into scale. So I made this pillow. So
Very
this
nice.
became like a signature block for me. But the only thing at the time, the different angles, it was hard for me to understand. You really can't see it, but I think I was drawing with pen. So I didn't know anything about the tools of quilting as I do now. But once I got a little bit better and I went into a sewing guild in my local area, I end up making it again. And by this time, I got into the quilt fabric world, so it's a little different.
Oh, very different. It's amazing how just a different choice in fabrics can make something look completely different.
And I believe if you can look at the back, I did all the quilting myself using my embroidery. By then, I got into embroidery. So I
That's
was using embroidery to finish my quilts.
oh,
And I,
fantastic.
learned the different techniques. This is a wall hanging. So this sits on my wall. And it's a
Very nice.
picture of me at the quilt shop that I made this at.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah. So I took it into that avenue of learning the technique. So
Right.
I don't know if you can see, I don't know if you can see this quilt behind me. This was my very first quilt.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So, did you do that quilt as a member of that guild?
No. Mm-mm. While I was at work, there was a quilt store down the street in Germantown in Philadelphia. It was called Burkholders. And this is where I learned scale and the different mixings of patterns.
Okay.
So this is the one where when you look at it, and I did all the quilting on my machine. Each week we did a block. And it's, this quilt is my all-time favorite. Like I keep it in my living room. But so all the blocks that you can do in quilting was done with this on this quilt. So I got I got a pretty good knowledge of quilting from this, and from there I just never stopped.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about that first guild that you belong to. Can you describe that guild?
There were ladies that had knowledge supreme. They were willing to share. So what they did, they opened up a store. And in that store, they had the long arm. So we would do the quilt from start to finish. Color theory, everything. Blocks, hand quilting, applique, turn applique. It wasn't just quilting to finish. They taught you a technique almost in every guild meeting. And so they kind of passed the information down to us. It was a mother and her 3 daughters.
Okay.
So her name was Pearl, and they used to call me Little Pearl. So I would, because they said you always have to take an extra step like my mom. But I said, if she's going to teach me, I want to learn. I didn't just, it took me so long to make that first block. I wanted to learn how to have the patience. Because when you're younger, you just want it done. And I would watch her meticulously take a 1-inch block and turn it into a masterpiece. So,
Fantastic.
and what she would do, she wouldn't just do the front of the quilt. The back of her quilts were works of art as well. So that taught me to take my time, pick fabrics and things that I love. So it's really hard for me to pick fabric online because I have to see it with my eye to see if it's going to speak to me or resonate in my color palettes or how it makes me feel. So if you look at most of my quilts, you'll see like a color theme. It's either going to be a teal or orange. I did start out with red and black and red is like the monotone. So I want to show you the one when we talk about the guild. This is the kind of things we would do in the guild. We didn't just quilt. We would turn our quilt into artwork.
So as a new quilter in that guild, did you feel any intimidation or trepidation in dealing with those very experienced members?
No, because they were very willing to share their knowledge and they took the time. When I say if we were there for 4 hours, if it took you 4 hours to get down one technique, they would just take the time to pass on that knowledge. So no, I did not feel intimidated. I felt rejuvenated because after working all week, I would have something done. So they kept me motivated to go, since it was a store as well, I was there every weekend. We had our guild meeting, but they also owned a business. So whatever class they had, I was there. That's why I have these little dolls sitting here. We could have a class with a person making dolls. So they didn't just teach us quilting. And I mean, I would sit at work and draw the faces. So I would take other parts of my day or week to apply, but it was just nice to have the community of women. And it was, like I said, it was all age ranges. And even my aunt got involved with the guild. So I had a family member to keep me motivated as well.
So now you as an experienced quilter, what would you say would be the best way to encourage a beginner quilter coming to you who may be intimidated by your experience or the quality of your work? What would you do to encourage a beginner?
For me, what I tell new people, because I've taught before, I tell them to pick something on a scale that they could finish. Don't go for that king size quilt with, say, points or things that are going to be intimidating in the beginning or paper piecing. Take the basics. That's why those blocks, your basic blocks, 4 inch. I try to do a little larger blocks, like 3 to 4 inches, and then show them how to manipulate in doing a table runner, something small.
Okay.
Uh, and it might not even really be a quilt. It could be something that they could use. See, sometimes as a quilter, we want to make that large quilt. But sometimes you have to meet them where they are. Nowadays, you have people who have items um, and the different, what are those things? The water bottles, and they don't want to carry certain things or their phone. So you can make a phone case. You can make a carrier or something that they're going to utilize. And when people see it, they'll say, "Oh, you made that?" And then they come back and then they're excited because someone looked at, we can always make tote bags, but when you make an item that that person will always carry and use, I think that will help them and motivate them to keep quilting until they get to that large project. Because that's their ultimate goal is to get them to a larger project. But you start small.
What was your first quilting tool? What was that first item that you got that made a difference in your quilting?
June Taylor has a slotted ruler. I used to get frustrated when I would try to make, um, you know how you try to make the 9 patch and you have to cut that 2.5 inch strip. Well, for some reason I could never cut straight, so I was always off. June Taylor, when I got that slotted ruler from Joann's, I loved it. So then that way I could even cut my squares out to even make my triangles. That one tool, and I still use that one to this day.
Okay. And what tool would you recommend to a beginning quilter as one of their very first tools that they would use?
A good rotary cutter.
Nice sharp blade.
Well, it's different because you could they have the different size. So if they start out with a 60 millimeter rotary cutter, that might not be good for them. They might have to like scale it back. They don't want to go down to the 18 either. So you have the range and brand too. Sometimes some of the brands aren't as sharp as others. I like Omni Red. That's my favorite. I'm partial to them. The grip, but everybody has their, but I say a good rotary cutter because that's going to be the basis. Your cuts are going to be important when you get into your piecing and having accurate cutting as much as possible. We don't want to be the quilting police and making it perfect, but we want them to have success. So we want to start out with a good cut. So I say a good rotary cutter.
Now you showed us your first quilt square that you made.
Mhm.
What was the first technique that you learned when you made that piece or any other piece as a beginning quilter?
The first technique I believe I learned, mm, I think it was color theory. It was
Okay.
even before the cutting. It was this quilt here. She had to really show me and convince me that those fireworks were going to match with the umbrellas and the different pieces. So I had to really look at this quilt and I had to take those pieces whole and imagine them being cut up and then transformed into this. So color theory was my biggest challenge because I looked at her like I'm like, what are you doing? That's not even going to look right. But she taught me that take your time, you pick out your small, a medium, and large scale, and then you blend it. So don't rush to get your fabric. Don't just buy the first piece. Buy with an intention, with a purpose.
And what would you recommend for a younger beginning quilter today? What what would be the first technique that you would recommend that they learn?
Half square triangles.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
most of the blocks are made of half square triangles. And once they learn how to sew them and pin them so they can still get their point in a block, whether it's a churn dash, even the one that I did, once they learn how to take that half square triangle, the accuracy in the cutting and the sewing, and then seeing how it fits in the block and learning how to square up. I think that's important too, because that's a step that a lot of people skip. And then when the quilt doesn't align in certain areas, they don't really understand why. But if that block is supposed to be 12 inches, to your best ability, do your squaring up. So between between that precision in cutting and squaring up, that's what I would do. I would teach them that but on a small scale.
Okay. Now, when it comes to quilters and especially new or inexperienced quilters, what skill do you think that they skip too quickly today and they move on to, as you said in the beginning, that king size quilt? What do you think that it is that they skip that they really shouldn't?
I think they skip the basic quilt block squares. Like sometimes I think people think that they are a waste of time. Like there's a basic square that you should know. And then they want to go into these artsy designs, which you might have just a piece of a square, and then you have the rest of the fabric, but then you don't know how to piece it. Then you can't really see how it was the cohesion in the construction because you don't know how piecing goes and how that block it might have sashing in it, even though it's all monochrome in the color. So they need to know all the basics of quilting before they attempt that large quilt. You need to know how to do sashings, square, a block on point. So there's different ways that a quilt is constructed. If you skip that step and try to go to a large scale where you might have like a starburst where you have all these points, and then now you're looking like, how am I going to put this together? There's an order in quilting, and they really need to know that.
Okay. I'm going to pose a question to the chat.
Okay.
What was the first quilting technique that you learned? Anybody in the chat, what was the first technique that you learned? I'd like to welcome you to the Okay, so now what I'd like to just add to you know, a technique that a beginning quilter should learn, definitely as Candace said, the piecing, learning seam allowances, that quarter inch really can make a difference between whether or not your quilt blocks come together accurately or whether you have something that's kind of wonky. Also, learning how to press instead of iron so things aren't getting stretched. Bias is going all kinds of funny ways. So your techniques with your iron is definitely super important. And then, as Candace said, your fabric selection, your color balance, scale, all of those things are really important for a beginner to learn. And it's a lot to do, sometimes in a short period of time, just because of a younger person wanting those instantaneous results. Okay. So, Candace, what traditional methods do we still preserve today that are important and make a difference in how quilts come out?
To me, when it comes to quilting, an important one is squaring it up, even when you're finished. Because to do your back and to put your binding on, that you have to have a good base. So those fundamental principles of squaring up that quilt, even when it's finished, is important. So, I mean, you have to do these three measurements that if the quilt is a 120 by 120 king size quilt, it's a daunting task because you have to lay it out and you have to take those three measurements. You have to square it up to get that binding to go on. And if you're going to finish it, like you have to understand, how am I going to finish this quilt? Because if you give it to a long armor and it's not squared up, when they go to put it on the machine, it could be a problem because now they have to baste it and it's not lining up. So that's it's an important part of the final process to get this quilt square.
And the answer to my question of the chat, we have good thread is important from Bob, and Linda is learning how to piece and keep that 1/4 inch seam. Very important. What I want to do now is I want to show some of Candace's earlier pieces, and she can talk us through a little bit of her earlier days of quilting. Okay, so. Okay, so this is one of Candace's earlier pieces. Candace, can you
So
talk us through this?
we had a new baby in our guild. So we made this as a gift for her. I made the quilt. I took the piecing on the back, and then one of the girls did the long arm. So that's what you see here. Now, this is one of those ones where you're talking about people wanting to venture off into something else. This is a t-shirt quilt. But because I was an experienced quilter, it took me no time. But here's one where you have different types of fabric and you have to make them have the same hand in sewing. So how do you do that? This was all serged. I didn't even use the sewing machine.
All right. Great.
Because the t-shirts were knit.
We're going to talk about using the serger and some newfangled gadgets briefly in just a few minutes. This one here?
This was a family member. She is now 16 years old. I made this for her.
That's beautiful.
Yes. Let me see.
I love the colors in this one.
So in this one, this is a guild project. So this is how we did it. I made the center square and I did it. The butterfly was an embroidery and every person took my fabric and they made a row. And I did the same for them. But this was the finished piece when we got done. So this is when I told you this is how they would mentor us. Because a lot of these, I would have never done this in the beginning. But I said, oh, that's a technique I would want to learn. So this is what we did. And we completed so many quilts like that by just doing round robins. Let's see the next one. This was a retreat quilt. So what we did is we had to prep. So I had bags, labels, paper, and had everything in order. And I literally finished this top in a weekend because this was our challenge at the retreat.
And we'll do this last one.
Mhm. That's a more recent one. Um, Recently, I worked for the Joannes, who's Farna Viking, and this was a project that they had. So I made this to display in the store.
Oh, love it. One of my favorites.
Mhm. So,
Okay, so now let's talk about some modern tools that people use in quilting now, and younger and newer quilters would be more inclined to use in their projects, getting started. Um, so let's talk about that quilt that you made that you used the serger on. Tell us
yes,
how you made that come about.
because the knits in the t-shirts were from her baseball, so they had different feels, and I had to use a stabilizer behind it. I did not want it to slip to keep the seam allowances. And that's a way to keep your 1/4 inch seam allowance because a serger, that seam is 1/4 inch.
So how was that quilt when it came to actually sandwiching and stitching the pieces together? Did that make a difference?
No, because once I put the stabilizer behind it, the shirt acted just like the cotton.
Okay.
And so I did not have a lot of stretching and pulling. And because I used the sashings and blocks around it, I kind of encased the knit. So I was really just dealing with the quilt fabric.
Nice, nice. All right,
Mhm.
definitely. So you also talked about your first quilt using an embroidery machine to do the
Yes.
actual quilting. Tell
Yes.
us about that and the technique and any challenges you may have had with that.
The challenge with the quilting was at the time I had only maybe 6 inches to deal with as far as the embroidery unit. So let me see. I think I have it here. I think now I use magnetic hoops. But the one I had before was just a 1 by 100 by 100 millimeter, which is like a 4 by 4. So I could only do a small area. So I would put it in there and I would do the design, then I would have to take it out and change it. I've always used magnetic hoops when it came to quilting because it's just I am not going to try to tighten down a quilt and then with a small base. So that was the only challenge. But I was kind of spoiled because the the quilt guild had a gamma. So all my quilts in the beginning were finished with on a long arm. So I didn't do quilts. But that one, the very first one, I tried with my embroidery machine. That was
So I
justified purchase.
so I have to say that I actually did a baby quilt using my single needle 5 by 7 inch hoop embroidery machine, and it was a challenge. And like I said, it
Mhm.
was a baby quilt size, so it was moving it, every couple of minutes and lining things up, and it was definitely a challenge. But I have to say that an embroidery machine now is considered a newer gadget that quilters could use to make quilts with. So anybody new or younger coming into the quilt world
Hmm.
might want to explore using that method as opposed to, maybe not being able to have access to a long arm or being able to afford a long arm, and certainly not hand quilting. So it's something that younger people could use.
For younger people, now that is one thing I would teach them how to free motion. I think it's because the machines now can handle it, and free motion will give them freedom in finishing
I like that.
the
Okay. So
piece.
they're regular domestic machine.
Domestic machines, because all you have to do is drop your feed dogs. And if it's not a really large piece, they can do the stitch in a ditch. They should learn that. That should be a part of their repertoire. And then they can move on to the other avenues, because what happens if you don't have access and you want to get this item done? So lack of
Absolutely.
knowledge could be a reason why they don't quilt. Because if they knew that they had to always depend on one avenue or another, we should have multiple avenues. Like to me, a king size quilt, I wouldn't even attempt free motion. It's going to a long armor. That's just me.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's a challenge.
So, but it's something smaller. You want to give them the freedom to be able to finish. Once you finish, you feel a sense of accomplishment, and then you are well, you're more to go on and do something else.
So let's talk about some other modern tools and techniques that maybe experienced longtime quilters don't use, and maybe they do. Let's talk a little bit about quilt design software. Probably the most famous and popular one is Electric Quilt, and we're on EQ8 at this point in
Hey,
time.
yes. I started out with 3.
How was that one? I understand.
So for me, that also taught me placement. But for them, they can even use those tools now and integrate it with their Crickets, because they give them different files than we used to get. I think it's a great tool because today's youth like to design their own. And if they design it, they will learn how to put it together. But you have your tool right there in front of you with EQ, and they get to see it. You get to see how much what the quilt looks like if you're going to use sashing or if you're not going to use it. How you're going to orient your blocks, how large your borders are going to be, how many you're going to put on there. You can do all that in the software. So it takes them from where I say we used to go out and try to buy patterns, they can create their own. So if you want to put even embroidery in there now, I think you can do that. Like you can decide if I want to put embroidery in certain sections of your blocks. The software gives you a limited design ability to me.
Absolutely. And when you couple in, as you said, the Cricut or any kind of digital cutting machine, a Silhouette Cameo or
Mhm.
a Brother Scan and Cut, all of those devices give you the opportunity to not only cut fabric, but you can actually cut things for applique. Even the AccuQuilt machine
Yes.
can assist in that.
And then in the guilds, I know our guild, they had it, like I said, it was a store. That's when I learned about AccuQuilt. And back then they only had the studio. So we used to, learn how to do your strips. And now this was before jelly rolls and layer cakes. And, we had to cut all those ourselves. But nowadays, um, I believe a lot of the Crickets, you can cut out paper. I mean, not paper, fabric, not only paper anymore. So before they only had the knife for paper and maybe wood or leather. I think they've added fabric. So if they wanted to do a little piece that had squares, they can do that now.
So what about you know, something modern would be Zoom classes or what we're doing right now, social media, virtual sew-ins. It's another new technique that definitely could attract younger, inexperienced quilters.
I Zoom is a wonderful tool, or even the online platforms for learning, because if they don't have the time to venture out to an area, they can do it in the comfort of their home. And a lot of the classes are pre-recorded. For me, even as an experienced quilter and sewist, I love the pre-recorded classes. If you don't feel that intimidation that I didn't get the project done, maybe you might, things that could go wrong in class and you're like, oh, but at home you say, okay, I'll fix it. I'll turn the video off, fix the problem, and I could go back. So it kind of gives them a little breathing room as far as, making sure that they can get the project done and at their own pace. Because when you have a class and you have an experienced person and a newbie, sometimes there is a little bit of intimidation for that new person.
And I'll throw out just two more modern gadgets or techniques. Using photo editing software or any kind of online or digital portfolio creating software. Another thing that might entice younger people to quilt, be creative.
They have tools now. The one I like the most is Spoonflower, because you can design your own fabric. So if a person says, well, I really don't like the fabric, they can design their own. Or if they have a specific item that they want to make, and for whatever reason it is, as long as it's not licensed, they can literally make their own fabric. So if they wanted to get pictures, you can add pictures, but you can also add texture by creating your own. That's a that was when that came out, that was a game changer for me.
And the last one that I'll throw out there is one that is used by one of our other co-hosts, Lisa Spain Moore, and that's QR codes. Lisa puts a QR code on her quilt label, as we learned last week, that for her will tie to a specific song that helps tell the story of her quilt, or that QR code could go to your own artist biography.
Mm-hmm. And I can embroider mine, and that's what I love about it. So I've taken all the technology because, like I said, my embroidery machine does that. When I heard that you could tie it in, I thought it was phenomenal, because if you're giving a gift, maybe you can't be there and you want to send a greeting, and you can do that. So it preserves not only the item that you made, but the message you want to send to the person, which is, I thought, is phenomenal.
All right. I'm going to throw a question out to the chat. What is one digital tool or modern technique that you rely on as a quilter, or you would like to learn from a younger, inexperienced quilter, but someone who's very savvy with modern technology? What's one tool or technique you'd like to learn or use right now? So while you are thinking about that question, the audience, I'm going to continue on with a few more of Candace's quilts and creations.
Mhm.
and she can talk about those a little bit more. Uh-huh.
So this is one of my favorites. I made this for my mother. She did not really like quilts, even though she took one, I made her one, but she loved wearing jackets. So I took a class and we did the little bricks, I think they were 4x6. And the technique, this was, I say 2011. It was, and nowadays we're right back to making quilted jackets. That's why I gave you this one. And I see how I can take some of the techniques that they have today. I think they've put pockets in them. I saw one that had like a curved pocket or putting a zipper, but just having the foundation. And I love those. I told you the color palette, the teal. That's the start of it. So that was one of my favorite things. Just taking that t-shirt apart.
Nice.
Mhm.
So now we're moving into some newer pieces that Candace has done.
Yes, this was a class, as you talked about earlier online. Now, as she was doing this class, I kept saying, my fabrics don't match. I have to see it. So I will take things and then I would throw in some blenders, as I call them, because I don't like too much print all over, but I'm learning how to work with different prints. So this was the technique I learned that day, and not to be so overly concerned about it.
So I have to personally say that my affiliation with Quilt Africa Tribe has taught me that you can make just about anything work, and to get out of your head of
Mhm.
it has to be perfectly matchy matchy. You can create
Yes.
a beautiful artistic piece by putting fabrics next to each other that you in another life would have said
Mhm.
absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Yes. So
So
I can't wait to quilt this stuff. I can't
this
wait.
is one of my favorites.
Mhm.
So, do you have any idea as to what type of design you would quilt that with?
I love butterflies, so I would look for an all over butterfly print.
Okay. All right.
So I would try to probably get like a variegated thread that has gold and green and orange in it so that you could
That
kind
would
of
be
see it.
nice.
Hmm.
That would be really nice.
Hmm.
Some wedges.
This was a class. So we took a 15-degree ruler and we cut our wedges. And then I just turned it into the circle that was the class. And then I used the fabric. And when I saw that fabric, I said, I love it, but I want to see it deconstructed. And that's why I added the black. I did another one where I put some white. I just didn't finish it yet, but I deconstructed it so I could break it down and add color to it.
Mhm.
And they will
I
be sitting outside on my table when I have my coffee in the morning.
I love how you've taken one fabric and given it two completely different looks.
Hmm.
And this is the piece de resistance.
Yes. This was when I threw all caution to the wind and said, whatever it's going to be, I'm not going to worry about it. The old me would have just labored over trying to get everything in order, but I didn't. I trusted the process. And I love the jacket. It fits, it wears well, everything.
So, Candace, I'm going to go back for 1 second. We have a question in the chat about this piece here.
Hmm.
you were talking about quilting it with a butterfly motif.
Mm-hmm.
Would you long arm that butterfly motif in an E to E or free motion, or would you free motion quilt it either on a long arm or a domestic machine?
I would do a long arm that is that is going to go by itself. I'm not because I want to put some borders around it. So I want to make it a little larger. And when you do embroidery, if it pulls too much on your machine, it's not good. So I don't have a sling to hold it up. So I only do small pieces in my embroidery. I don't try to weigh down my arm with a large quilt. So,
Okay. Well, thank you for
hmm
your beautiful quilts. They look
hmm
wonderful. And I have a couple of questions.
hmm
Um, so for you, and now, things are modern,
hmm
what piece of technology do you, in your opinion, do you think has improved quilting?
Let me think. You know which one? Irons. To have a good iron,
Okay.
because some of your quilts, if you don't get those pieces set, I've been through mm, at least 30 irons in my quilting journey. And you need one, you need an iron that's going to be hot enough because like you said, it's a difference between pressing and ironing. You really need something that's going to give you a good press. If the foundation for your quilt, we go back to the foundation. If the foundation, which is that piece, is is crisp, you can move on. That and best press. Iron and best press.
All right. All right. So
For me.
thinking about some of those modern things that we talked about, social media, Zoom classes, Valencia says she's a visual learner. So of those newer techniques and gadgets and digital things that we have, what would you say has really improved quilting today?
During the pandemic, people depended on Zoom and the digital space. A lot of people picked up quilting during that time because they could see something and they had the time to sit and digest what was going on. The digital tools are beautiful, but like Valencia says, some people do need hands-on, but at least you can go back. Not feeling that you have to wait 2 weeks for a class when you can go back and rewatch. Or now they have the YouTube, you'll find a short and they'll have a technique. You're like, I just want to know how to put a binding on. I don't want to know the cold quilt. And you can type it in and get the technique that you want to, want to learn how to do.
YouTube University.
Yes. So it has helped. And to me, it doesn't take away from in-person classes because that's a totally different, um, to me, a different venue. I think it adds to it because Cheryl, you might explain something in a way that I get it. And once I get it, I can move on to the next part of my project. You understand what I'm saying? So when being
Absolutely.
able to find that person that speaks to you in the technique that you need. Because paper piecing is an avenue that you really I don't think you could really learn that really well online because you have to see it. Some of the hand techniques you can't really learn online, but once you get the basis, you already have your foundation. And as a teacher, it's easier when your students come in with a foundation, and then you can move on to the technical part of the lesson. You can spend more time than showing them how to thread their machine. That's when I say the online can help because there's some things that people come in class that kind of takes the time away from the technique. They have the avenue to get their help online.
So I'm gonna ask you about creativity, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of these tools and gadgets and modern day equipment that we have they had any effect, or have they sacrificed creativity in any way?
Hmm. I don't think so, because we talked about EQ, and if you've been on that platform, and if you want to make anything for yourself, you just have to put in the work and the time. So you don't have to use a pattern. To me, that was a game changer, because I'm saying if I'd rather buy fabric than buy a pattern. And if I see this is what I did with this pattern, I had to put it in the EQ to end up to get the sizing that I wanted. And EQ gives you your mathematics. It's already done, so you don't have to really take the time. So when you use a tool and it enhances the process, that's what I'm saying. So some of these tools, to me, no, they enhance the creativity, because people are making things on their own, and you're like, wow, I wouldn't have thought of doing that, because we were always taught to have these patterns and go get a pattern. No, nowadays they just do it.
Okay.
That's why we have a lot of modern quilters today, because have taken they don't like the look or the aesthetics of traditional quilting, and they've taken it with these tools and made it into their own modern twist. That's my perspective, because I do like using tools. I do like to marry processes. This takes away some of it doesn't take away the creativity to me. It takes away some of the time that you would spend looking for a pattern, trying to figure out what you want to do. You can just do it yourself.
Mhm. So do you think that technology and tradition can coexist?
They have to, because the tradition is your foundation. But the technology, like I said, we live in a fast-paced society. People want to move. They don't want to spend 6 hours at a quilt shop. So if they have the tools to cut their fabric, to print it, to make it, this will take away, it will allow them to have their creativity, make their products, but still enjoy life.
Mm.
Because to
So,
me, like, I give you an example, AccuCut, AccuQuilt. They're the two that, if you have any design that you like that's not licensed again, you can go to AccuCut and get your own dye made.
oh, you know that.
So if you have something that this is what I love to do. Like, say if I'm going to make quilts and this is my signature quilt, you can get them to cut your make a die, so you can cut out your quilt pattern exactly the way you want it. Once you've done it in AccuQuilt, because you already have the pattern, take a picture of it, scan it to them, and they will create a die for you.
Great.
I had to literally take hours I didn't know about the measurements. I'm just trying to get this quilt to match. So I spent a lot of time.
So, how do we preserve quilting's history while we're welcoming and using all these new innovations?
You always make sure that you teach the foundation. The innovation will come, but since they're new, they're still looking for the process. We never stop telling them the process. And telling someone the process, you could say, but this is an added benefit. You could use this tool, but know this is the process to get to where you want to go. But the tool will make it a little faster, just like we could use scissors. But no, we use rotary cutters because a rotary cutter is going to make that cut better. Scissors, we know it's not going to work. Not for quilting. Even though, but if that's all you had, that's what you would use. So you would show them the proper way of using scissors. A lot of people don't know that you don't cut up in the air. You understand what I'm saying? So knowing the technique, keep the blade on the mat, and you can get a straight cut, but it's going to take a little bit more time to be precise using those scissors.
In our last 5 minutes, let's talk about the marriage of the younger, inexperienced quilter versus the established quilt guild with highly experienced quilters in it. What's the best way to encourage a beginner quilter who feels totally intimidated by the perfection standards that very experienced quilters have because they have the techniques to support it?
I believe
What's
it's
the
just
best way?
taking the time. You have to sit down with them. Like when they're in the class, you have to give them your undivided attention. And you cannot be so critical in everything that they get wrong. So you have to sit there and say, we already know where we're at in our journey. You don't say, I would do it this way. You would want to taper the conversation and say, how can I encourage you to get this done with the knowledge and skills that you have already? Because if I know people who to me are excellent quilters. I don't even compare. When I see some of the quilts at the quilt shows, I'm like, I'll never get to that level. But we don't want to discourage. That's the hardest thing. So when you bring them in, make sure you bring them in projects that will give them they'll make them feel included. You understand what I'm saying? If you know that you have new people coming in, don't do a quilt that's going to make them feel intimidated. Start off with something very beginner friendly. And then I have a new process. What I do call it easy hard. So if it's something that seems hard to them, then you might say the next time, let's try something and let's do a project that's not as hard. I even found that what we would do was make clothes sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
We would change up. I have a jacket. It's all out of quilt fabric. I wanted to show you. And sometimes I forget I made these things, but this was all out of quilt fabric. I was like, oh, that's cute. So sometimes we have to just think outside the box. And it's almost like the duster we just made.
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely agree. Sometimes it doesn't have to be the full-on quilt, but you can work your way up to that with other projects. I have a final question for you, Candace. What will quilting look like in 20 years from now? What do you think?
With all the tools that they have nowadays, I believe it's going to basically be the same because you really can't get away from the traditional techniques of quilting. Even though you have tools that assist you, the tools can't piece for you. They can't do your color theory. They can't bind. You still, as the crafter, the quilter, the sewer, you still have to put that piece together. But now you might have tools and digital products that you can incorporate into your piece, but I don't think it's going to take away from quilting. Because we see it with the Amish quilting when they sit and they do the hand stitching. I haven't seen anything duplicate that yet.
Great.
So you can't take the human out of the quilting.
Well, thank you, Candace. I'm
Mhm.
going to wrap up with just a message to everyone who's listening. Quilt Africa Tribe is going to be having their Quilt Africa International Online Summit for 2026. It will be held on July 8th through July 10th, 2026. So, everyone, please keep an eye out for posters and details and more information on social media for registration and details for how you can attend the Quilt Africa Summit 2026. I really want to thank Candace for your words, your wisdom, your knowledge, and everything that you have shared with us today. And finally, I just want to say that quilting has always been more than fabric, it's been more than thread. It's mentorship, it's storytelling, it's resilience, and most importantly, it's community. So every generation that enters quilting, they enter the world differently, but everybody's goals are pretty much the same. Everyone wants to create something meaningful with their hands and with your heart. So the strongest quilting communities won't choose between tradition and innovation, but they will actually, as Candace has told us, make room for both. So I want to thank my special guest today, Candace Bracy, for enlightening us for this hour. And I want to sign off for this week's Uncut Thread. I will be back with you next week for another episode of the Uncut Thread. Everyone, stay safe, be happy, be well. Have a great rest of your day. Bye for now.
And we're off. Thank you so much,